right now, I get the impression that a lot of people are not interested in listening to each other. So unless we have an ability to have tough conversations, to actually hash out, those new ideas are going to come very slowly. And most of them will be shot down because we don't necessarily like change very much as human beings. And so those are some of the tough conversations that we're going to need to be having, especially if, in light of COVID and all the exposing it's done of our existing systems and how fraught and fragile they are and how they don't work for everybody. What conversations do we need to have in order to once and for all build a world that works for everybody?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dichotomy podcast. This is a show dedicated to exploring the dichotomies we experience in business and in life. My name's Mike Reed, and I'm a guy who's incredibly fascinated by understanding why we make the decisions we do in life, and ultimately, how do we lead a good life? As a business owner, I get the pressures of managing business, family, money, health can create great inner conflicts around what we actually want out of our business and our lives. This podcast is dedicated to exploring just that. I hope you enjoy it. G'day, ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike Reed here, and welcome to today's episode of the Dichotomy podcast. If you're new to the show, well, welcome. You have arrived at a interesting destination because this show is all about exploring the dichotomies that we all face in business and in life. And I'm going to assume that maybe you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you're at least entrepreneurial by nature. And as entrepreneurs, as entrepreneurial people, we face unique challenges. Often we feel torn, pulled in opposing directions, kind of conflicted about where we should put our time, energy, focus, resources, priorities. And so this show is all about exploring those. It's about unpacking for my guests what have been the dichotomies they've faced in their own life and how did they navigate them, what did they learn from them. And my guest today is Jonathan Miller. He's a speaker, facilitator, he's a leadership coach, and he specializes in working with high-performing people to be powerful in the face of conflict. So his whole bag is all about conflict resolution, and how to navigate that. He believes in the power of honing one's communication skills to not just deal with conflicts, but to transform them into powerful partnerships that serve their business and their lives. Pretty cool kind of bio. Does a lot of interesting things around the communication space, around nonviolent communication, the power of negotiation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was really, fascinated to talk to Jonathan. And as you would expect, he is a fantastic communicator himself. And we dug into some dichotomies that I think many of you will probably really relate to. We talked about the dichotomy between conflict and personal growth. We talked about the dichotomy between growing a business and knowing that there is kind of nowhere to get to. Often in business, as entrepreneurs, we feel like we're trying to build something towards a particular destination. And of course, through mindfulness, techniques, practices, you realize that actually there really is no destination at all. And so we kind of dig into that. We talk about the dichotomies between being a digital nomad and, versus actually, really caring for the environment we're in. We talk about how to resolve conflict, have difficult conversations. We talk about the dichotomies between being ordinary versus extraordinary, and how Jonathan deals with discomfort. And he's got some pretty cool stories he shares that are, I think, really relatable for everybody listening. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Dichotomy podcast with Jonathan Miller. Hey, Jonathan Miller, welcome to the Dichotomy podcast. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, you mentioned we were in the green room, and I hope I can ask you this, but you said you had a bit of a challenging morning this morning. Would you be open to sharing what was going on in your morning?
Sure, yeah. I had...
Throwing you right in the deep end there, sorry.
Oh, yeah, we're going right into things. I had a call that was confronting. It was a confronting call in that So I'll give you the context, and then I'll give you why it was a challenging call for me. Basically, I had a call with this guy. So I have a podcast. It's called the Mindful Communication Podcast. It's a great outlet for me to meet lots of professionals in the field of communication. It's a topic I'm fascinated by. I get to meet really cool people. And I wanted to meet this one person in particular. Now, this individual also has a very popular podcast. I think it's like one of the Apple's top 50 podcasts, which I've never, been on a podcast like that big to this point. And I managed to book a meeting with this person because I said, I want to have you on my podcast and I'd love to know what it would take to be on your podcast. And in this conversation, I just got a taste of how unprepared I was for this guy's podcast. And it's not that I haven't done podcasts before, but the caliber of questions and the amount of intention that he was bringing to the conversation, it really gave me that moment. I don't know, maybe you've had this moment, Mike, where you, all of a sudden, it's like a blind spot has been revealed to me. This thing that I did not know, that I didn't know, all of a sudden came into my vision. I saw what I didn't know. And now I knew that I didn't know. And then all of a sudden, there's this gap that landed in my in my perspective, in my point of view. There's this huge gap of where I'm at and where this guy's at and where I want to go. And that is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable gap when you realize what you don't know. And it's like so striking. And so I was sitting in that because here I am. I thought I'm so confident. I can usually handle pretty much like any social situation, any question you can, Mike, we're gonna have a nice chat. You can throw any curveball at me. I'm usually able to handle it. And here, boom, this guy, I was speechless at times. And I'm like, I have no idea what to say right now. And so it definitely threw off my morning. And this person is in Australia and I'm calling in from Cape Town, South Africa. So it was my first thing in the morning and it was the end of day for him. And I was just caught off guard. And so it put a bit of a funk to my morning. That's kind of the story behind that.
Gotcha. So now thank you for sharing. And I am unbelievably fascinated to know what were some of the questions that he was asking, or what was the intention that he was giving that threw you so off guard?
The questions were a bit specific. They were so my expertise is really around conflict. And he just had some really great questions about conflict, which I generally know how to answer, but his questions were very particular. And I think that it may have been the morning. I was still wiping the dust from my eyes. It may have been that I was genuinely unprepared, but wherever it is, I had some answers, but they didn't come out as fluidly as they usually do. So that was kind of the context of the questions, but the intention that he's bringing, and Mike, this may be a note for you and for me and for any of our listeners, either that have a podcast or want to start a podcast, is this person has done work with like a coach for podcasts. And what he learned in this process was really putting the listener first. And the orientation with which he operates in terms of being a host, his thinking was like this. He said, if we record a conversation and it goes 1 hour and I find that the last 5 minutes are not really amazing, I'm going to cut off those 5 minutes because otherwise, there's 10,000 people downloading this podcast. That's 50,000 minutes wasted. And I don't want to do that to people. I don't want to do that to my listeners. So I thought that was striking at first. He also talked about how on his monitor, he has a picture of someone. He literally has a physical picture of this woman. Let's call her Annie. He's like, I have a picture of Annie here. She's a 38-year-old divorced executive. She drives an Audi. She's interested in this, this, and this. And every episode, I have her up on my screen. And I know that I'm asking questions for her, not what I'm interested in, but for her. And I was really taken back by that as well. That was really striking to bring that kind of intentionality to every episode that he records, that he has people on his show. The last thing that really threw me off, though, was that we were having this conversation. He was getting to know a little bit about me and what it is that kind of I was going to bring to the table. And like I said, I was kind of fumbling this morning. And he asks me, if you think about how I want to cut and chop away all of the fluff and really just have an amazing conversation, how much of our conversation do you think that I would actually keep in terms of a podcast episode? And I said, I don't know, like half of it. And he's like, yeah, a little, probably a bunch less than that. And I was just pretty speechless at that point and like confronted. And I was also there. I was like kind of that fishbowl moment where I was like watching this happen. I'm like, oh, this is good. This is juicy. I'm getting a lesson right now. I'm getting some free like advice and consultation on what it takes to be like a top 50 podcast on Apple. Because I listen to podcasts too, but what does it really take to up my game? And I'm like, I was aware that I was experiencing that gap so I could enjoy it and be and terribly uncomfortable with it at the same time. So that's kind of some of the intentionality that I was talking about that he brought to that conversation. As a podcaster, Mike, is any of that kind of resonating with you?
I mean, of course, right? It's funny you share this story at the beginning of our episode because I now feel a weight of maybe pressure is not the right word, but a weight of self-reflection around, at my own show and think about, am I bringing the same level of intentionality? I mean, of course, the short answer is no. Otherwise, it would end up being a top 50 podcast of which we're on the ascension, but not there yet. So I think it is a moment where you get to get a window into, are you going to level up or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we get these wonderful moments, perhaps too frequently in life, where the universe comes along or someone else comes along and provides us with a very clear and confronting ultimatum of, am I going to stay ordinary or choose the extraordinary world?
That's it. And there's nothing wrong with choosing the ordinary. There's nothing wrong with stepping into that safety and security. It's just a choice. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I'm always going to choose to move forward into that growth, into that extraordinary.
And I guess that is the theme of what this show is all about, is those choices that we are confronted by as we go through life. And I think for anyone listening, you can probably relate to different moments in your own life where do you choose the ordinary path or the extraordinary path? Hey, so a bunch of people ask me, what is a dichotomy? Well, the dictionary defines a dichotomy as a division between two things that are opposed or maybe feel opposed. So think of it as something in your life where maybe you're feeling torn or afflicted. Perhaps it's opposing ideologies you have about life. Maybe it's something about your marriage or your business. Whatever it is, you're struggling to find balance and contentment while this dichotomy exists in your business or your life. And so all my conversations with my guests are wide-ranging. We talk about business, philosophy, psychology, health, wealth, emotions. My goal is to tease out what are the parts of themselves or their life where they feel torn, afflicted, or maybe uncertain. As we learn how they navigate those challenges, I hope you get a deeper insight into your own business, life, and the dichotomies you face as well. Jonathan, apart from this morning, can you think back to the last significant time where you had that choice before you, and what was it relating to in life, and what unfolded?
There's one that comes to mind. I'm sure that there's been others that have happened since. Actually, I'll talk about one that was really recent. It was actually in the last month in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I have not admittedly taken much time to think about racism and the race issue. I'm a white heterosexual male. I just didn't really see it as something that was my concern. I have friends of all colors and creeds. I'm like, it's just, it wasn't a thing for me. I just didn't consider it. And I also am like pretty disconnected from the news at times. So I knew some stuff was going on, but I'm like, okay, well, it's happening. I have this distinction that I love to operate in my life is this idea of my file and not my file. And I ask that for a lot of things, especially in today's day and age, protecting our time, right? Is this my file or is this not my file? So if it's not my file, I'm not going to pay attention to it because I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. It's not going to make a difference for me in my life or anyone around me. So I kind of categorized these riots and all this kind of stuff, not my file. And my partner, Laura, she thought differently and she looked into it and she started doing the looking and she, came to some realizations around her contribution to the problem and she confronted me about it. And it was super confronting. I remember standing in the kitchen and I don't even remember what it is that she said, but she was talking to me about how this is a problem, we can't allow this. And I remember feeling super defensive around it. And it was a super subtle defensiveness, a slight tightness in my chest. My jaw tightens only a little bit. And that's something that's a classic sign that I'm feeling defensive because I'm trying to justify myself and da-da-da. And I remember she broke down and she's like, we are not whole and complete right now. And I was shocked. I was like, whoa, okay, something is up here. And I was still feeling defensive at the time. And I was still feeling a little confronted about all this. Yeah, man, this is not really my issue. I'm not racist. This is totally fine. But I took on the perspective that maybe there's something that I'm missing here. And I was in a funk about this same kind of funk that I had this morning with this gap that I'm seeing. There was inklings of that. And so, we started doing some research, we started doing some reading, we started doing the looking and the work required to understand our racial biases in these. And I don't remember the exact moment it was, but I have, through this process, it's been a few weeks now, I've come to terms with this, but I remember in that first week, I was so confronted by the gap in my understanding of this white supremacist system that is kind of underpinning the globe right now. And it's this a system that oppresses anyone who's not white. And just for our listeners who maybe haven't looked into this issue as much, white supremacy has this idea. We have this idea of it's a hatred against anyone who's not white. That's not what this is about. This is about a socioeconomic and political system that provides an privilege to people with white skin. And that's on an individual and a collective level. And there's you can take a look at where all the wealth of the world, most of the wealth of the world is concentrated. It's concentrated in Europe. It's concentrated in North America. There's mostly white people that live in these two places. So it's not this is not news to anyone. And so what it's called a white supremacist system. And it really is just confronting as a benefactor of this system, that because I'm a benefactor, I'm upholding this system. And that is so confronting for me. That was such a confronting moment. I felt so uncomfortable because I saw this gap and wow, I'm not doing anything about this. In fact, my inaction, my collapsing of non-racism with anti-racism has allowed me to perpetuate an oppressive system that oppresses people in my life that I love. And so that was another one of those tension moments that was really confronting me.
I love what you said around collapsing non-racism with anti-racism. Can you explain that, what you mean by that in more detail?
Certainly. Non-racism is something that I practiced my whole life. It's the idea that, I'm not racist. And it is, again, this is from the perspective of a white male. Okay, white heterosexual, I'm non-disabled, I'm all my brain chemistry is working as far as I know. So this idea of non-racism is this idea that because I'm not racist, it's not my problem. And although I'm practicing non-racism, what I'm not doing is I'm not being against racism. And there's a distinct difference between the two. Because if I'm not against it, that means that I'm trying to passively take a step back and not participate in it. But by trying to take a step back and not participating in it, what I'm essentially doing is I am participating by perpetuating the existing system.
I think that's quite confronting for me too. And I think for probably a bunch of people listening, that I have throughout all my life taken a very similar stand to you, and I would say that's a great way to describe it. I've practiced non-racism. I don't experience it in my life. I come from a country where sadly there is quite a bit of racism, and I, in part, largely I didn't resonate with that culture, and that's in part why I didn't feel called to continue to live in Australia. I wanted to move to a different place in the world, and one of the things I love about Canada is the melting pot of different cultures and races. But what you've described in terms of that collapsing of those two ideologies, that's so accurate. And now I'm reflecting on my own stance and thinking to myself, how do I play a more active role in the world I want to see in this arena, as opposed to, because I think it's very easy to sort of step back and feel a little bit helpless as to what can I do? How do I make an impact in this arena? One of the things that I've been thinking about recently is just simple things like taking more of a stand around the issue with family and with friends, and making my kind of view clear, and then also asking to enroll them in that way of being, with me and with the people in my life, and I guess to create a clear line in the sand around, what I'd be willing to tolerate and accept and what I wouldn't, which is, a more defined position than I've perhaps taken before. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and to be clear also, one thing I was also confronted by was the fact that, I was non-racist. I'm not like overtly racist to anyone. Again, I'm also from Toronto. Like, there's like a huge melting pot. I grew up with like tons of people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of skin colors and whatever it is. But it is, as I've done the looking, and I encourage everyone in our audience to do the looking as well, is that there's lots, the system has perpetuated lots of covert racism. It's things that you don't necessarily notice. And it's because that's how our brains work. We are all prejudiced. We all prejudge because our brains classify things. Our brains categorize. That's how our brains make sense of the world. And so our brains are going to categorize and classify based on anything it can. And one of the ways that it classifies and categorizes is skin color. And then we have all these stereotypes that play into that as well. And so when we meet someone, there's a natural prejudgment that happens. Unless you're free of that judgment, I mean, give me your secret. But if you have that prejudgment, then there's kind of like those racist undertones in there as well, because you're, again, prejudging somebody based on certain characteristics, certain features of them. So I would recommend, before we kind of take over this whole interview to talk about this, I would recommend everyone just do the looking. It is worthwhile. And Mike, if I can add probably one thing that you might be experiencing right now as you listen to this, and maybe our listeners as well, is that there is a conflict happening right now. There's a conflict in our values because, and I experience this often with the environments, because I would love to say that I love the environment, and here I am. I eat meat from time to time. Driving cars, like just even living in Canada or a really developed country. Like it's just some of the activities we do just naturally destroys the planet, and so there's an internal conflict that happens inside because we as human beings, we love being integral. We love being our word. And so you and I, Mike, we say, well, I stand for the equality of all people. I think everyone should have equal access and equal benefits to anything and everything, right? No one should be having anything taken away from them or, anything like that based on, of all things, the color of their skin. No way, that is not happening. But yet it is. And you're realizing, like I did, that by not speaking out against that, we're saying that's okay.
Jonathan, I appreciate you sharing that. That's given some wonderful food for thought. You mentioned conflict of values and an inner conflict. Where have you experienced the greatest inner conflict in recent history in your own life? It doesn't have to necessarily even be recent, but what would you say is the pervasive inner conflict that comes up for you most often?
I think it's kind of relating to a lot of our conversation here before. And it comes down to my integrity. And integrity for me is my number one value. I frankly, I think it is the king of all values. It is the value that supersedes all values. Because if you have a value for growth and for connection, I mean, you can say that, but if you're not being your word on it, what use is it to declare that? So for me, integrity is so important. Being your word, because I just think that without integrity, nothing works. And when you have integrity, when you're being your word, people can count on you, people can trust you. And so integrity opens up this whole door of like, well, how do I live a life of integrity? How do I truly live in alignment with my values? And how do I truly be my word? And so it's come up a bunch of times where I say, well, no, I'm not a racist. And here I am exposing these biases that I didn't realize I have. Oh, shoot, I am actually quite racist and I'm contributing to the problem and I'm not doing anything about it. So that is kind of where it's come up. It comes up with that environmental issue as well. Like, oh, wow, I'm definitely polluting the planet. I'm buying lots of things with plastic on it, blah, blah, blah. And not, and yet I love the planet and I think it's beautiful and I want it to be around for as long as possible and habitable by human beings. So that's a conflict I experience. I also believe, one thing that I've struggled with, struggle is a strong word. I ate vegan for many, many years. And then since then I've kind of gone on this whole up and down journey. And now I'm pretty relaxed about it. I'd say I eat about 90% of my meals are vegan. Every once in a while, I'll have a meat dish when I go out. And so I'll have a chicken thing and that's it. No beef or anything like that. And still those times I'm not being my word. And so there is a little bit of this erosion of my values in that sense, right? Because if I was really living in alignment with my values, I don't think I would do that. So, this is a conflict that kind of comes up for me a lot. I'd say there's other values as well, values for, it just really depends on the flavor of the moment. You know what I mean? I might have my top, some of my top values are connection and personal growth and adventure. And there's other times where I just really want comfort. I really want safety. I really value, I don't know. I'm not think of any words right now, but that is the core of what internal conflicts are all about, is competing values at various times. Because although we have these values that are really important to us, the name of the game is finding a balance between all these needs, all these values that we have, and navigating life as smoothly as possible, living in alignment as much as possible with our top values and the values that are calling out to us in that moment.
Well, I think the way you've described it in the moment, I think is really an important point, because I started this podcast at a time where I was interested in exploring the dichotomy between leading the high performance, build an empire kind of life versus leading a simpler life. And I felt like for many, many years, you had to pursue one or the other, that you couldn't find a blend of the two. And the pendulum had swung so far in the direction of wanting to build an empire in my early 20s that I just desperately craved some simple life, because the other was I was drowning and suffocating in. So whereas now I have a different flavor, I'm back in empire building mode, having had some time in the simple life, and I'm feeling really enlivened and enriched, and it's I'm pumped to be leaning into the fire of empire building again. And so, but my values have changed from today compared to what they were, 2 or 3 years ago. And so, as you say, as we go through life, really the name of the game is alignment in any one moment, to move as smoothly through life and business as we possibly can, and I guess enjoy it. because I'm curious how much of your day and week and month is colored by the anguish of, am I making the right decision versus just being in the moment, comfortable with the decision you made and just, enjoying it?
Oh, I would say pretty little. I'm usually like enjoying it, and I don't want this to make it seem like I'm super serious all the time. I mean, I have a regularly scheduled program for reflecting, for designing my schedule. I mean, I would say that even just looking at my schedule, like as an entrepreneur, as a coach, I mean, I have a lot of power over my schedule, and I look at my calendar and I love what I do for like pretty much the entire day. I have like lots of fun, and I like am excited to get on all these calls. Like I have like a big roster of clients. I love working with all of my clients. If I didn't love working with the client, I wouldn't take them on. So that's tons of fun. I'm taking courses. Those are tons of fun. I really get to choose what I want to work on. So I'm not too anguished about it. I'm not like sitting there reeling in like, woe is me. I'm not living in alignment with my values. That said, what is important is that I know that also on my calendar, every week I talk to my coach. Every week I have planning to bring intention to what I'm working on. Every month I take time to reflect. Every year, of course, New Year's resolution, I definitely reflect on the goals, on my values, what's working for me, what's not working for me. Having those pauses, I think, are really critical, and having a structure for them so that they regularly show up. And you can take pause, take into account how it is that you want to be living your life, readjust if necessary, and then, blast off.
Would you say you're more of a lifestyle entrepreneur or more of a build an empire kind of an entrepreneur?
At this point, I would definitely say a lifestyle entrepreneur, though there's that build an empire thing kind of raging in the background from time to time. That I would say is definitely a dichotomy of sorts that I can see where you're coming from. And what I loved hearing about you is that you are feeling enlivened by it. Like you're feeling that fire right now. And for me, I mean, that's your sign. That's your sign that you're heading the right way. If you're feeling energized by it, you're feeling alive by it. We have this amazing human technology, and they're called our emotions or feelings. And they live in our body, and they tell us what's important to us in that moment. And it sounds like what's really important to you right now is the empire building. It's getting you jazzed. It's getting you excited. It's having you feel alive. What better way to feel than alive? My goodness. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
I think it's also funny. I sit here and I talk to you now, Jonathan, and I really enjoy this conversation. I love this as an opportunity to self-reflect on my day and week and month and how I'm feeling about life and business. And it's kind of, for me, I think that's the enjoyment of talking about philosophy and life, is that you get to take stock and reflect on, am I in alignment? Am I feeling congruent? Am I happy? Am I looking at my calendar and enjoying what I'm doing? And sometimes we can get so caught up in just all the doing of it, we don't stop and reflect on and ask that question. And even just stopping and asking that question is kind of the thing that's like, yeah, you know what, I am. And then that puts the body back into a whole different physical and emotional state.
Yeah, absolutely. Having those planned pauses. And for you and our listeners, I mean, it can be a coach. It doesn't have to be a coach. You can even have a journaling thing. You can do it with a friend. I have an accountability buddy, like friend of mine. We talk every week. Even those, I think, are just so critical, as long as there's some sort of structure in place to take that pause. Otherwise, I think you said it so beautifully. You just get caught in this mode of doing. And then you become that human doing instead of that human being, when that's where really the juice is who are you being in that moment, right?
What's your, if any, framework for how you go about making decisions in your business and life?
I don't know if I have necessarily a framework, but a lot of what we talked about is pretty spot on in terms of how it is that I am thinking about some of these things. Is I'm just, for success for me, is living as closely in alignment with my values as possible. And so like I said, some of my top values: integrity, personal growth, connection, adventure. I mean, I moved to Cape Town, South Africa in January. It has been an adventure, let me tell you. And yeah, I'm taking courses, and my wife's also a coach, so we have these great conversations. So I feel like I'm feeding into those, and that is one way it looks. And in 10 years from now, I could even have the same values and have it look completely differently. So I would say that the framework is be in integrity with your values as much as possible. And for me, sorry, I'm going to say this as myself. If I align myself as much with my values as possible, then I will feel satisfied and fulfilled. And so far, that has been the case, with, the occasional stress, worry about whatever it is that comes up, because that's how our brain operates. It wants to keep us safe and protected, right?
Totally right. Reptile and the monkey is rearing its head all day, every day.
Oh, yeah.
What prompted the move to Cape Town?
A few things. One, like I said, little taste of adventure. The initial plan was to be a digital nomad no matter what. I had been living in Toronto for some time, was ready for a little shift. And the initial plan was to move somewhere to Asia, like Thailand, Bali. I'd lived there before in Thailand and just loved it. Tried so long, Mike, to get tired of eating Thai food, and I just couldn't do it. It was so challenging. It was just so delicious. So wanted to move there. Got the invite to come to Cape Town, South Africa, because my partner has an aunt and uncle here. So we said, sure, why not? YOLO, let's do it, right? And through that conversation, what opened up was an opportunity to actually do some consulting work here with a local nonprofit that supports youth entrepreneurs around Africa and the Middle East. And they were thinking of bringing in coaching into their ecosystem as a way to support these entrepreneurs. Just so happens my wife and I are coaches. And so we started consulting with them on how that would look like, what a really high impact, low cost coach training program would look like. And we were about to run the pilot project on April 1st, 2020. COVID, of course, struck mid-March 2020. So the project was put on hold, supposed to run in 5 countries. But now you and I were speaking, and it's the end of June 2020, and things seem to be opening up again. So we have some of our initial meetings booked with a Rwanda team this Friday. And so we'll see how it turns out. It's going to be different from what we anticipated, but yeah, it was kind of twofold. The one aspect was we wanted more adventure, we wanted more fun. And for those who have not been to Cape Town, South Africa, it is fun. Table Mountain is in the middle of the city, and it is like a giant playground. There's so many climbs and hikes. And if you drive just outside the city, it's so mountainous, and the ocean is here as well. So it is tons of fun. And there's also this social impact aspect that I'm super interested in exploring. So those are I'd say the 2 major drivers.
Very cool. What were you most afraid of in making that move?
I'm trying to think back of what had me most afraid. And I think it was the fact that maybe it was just the unknown. Admittedly, I had been running a coaching practice for only a handful of months. I think what it was, are we going to be able to make it work? Because both my wife and I running coaching practices abroad, not established, started out in the red, and we just kind of going off savings. So we didn't have a precedent that everything's going to work out. So that was a huge thing. We were grinding pretty hard. Once we got here, there was that transition period. Transitions are really tough for, I think, the vast majority of humans, especially when you're moving to a new continent with a new culture and navigating all these new things. So that was tricky. But yeah, as soon as we got into a rhythm, we started working pretty hard. We were doing that consulting work that I mentioned. We were, doing the grind of getting our coaching practices up and running. So I would say that was maybe the quote scariest. I don't know if I was ever scared. I wouldn't call it scared as an emotion, but there was concern. There was unnecessary anxiety, worry, all that kind of stuff. That was probably the biggest thing. And also, I suppose, the safety factor, though now that we're here, we have a better lay of things. I'm feeling much more at ease about my ability to keep myself safe and, regardless, what with the circumstances around us. Yeah.
How do you and your wife deal with, I'm curious, in terms of your relationship, deal with uncertainty together?
That is a fantastic question. And the reason it's fantastic is because I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. Because there was actually this amazing moment that happened that I wanted to share with you and our listeners when we got to Cape Town. And it really launched me into this area of conflict. So I've been in the communication space for a while, but I was pretty generalized in communication. I liked all things communication, still do. But conflict became at the forefront for me in terms of my interests. And it came because of what I experienced when I moved here, which was conflict. Now, I'm very fortunate. My relationship with my partner is pretty outstanding. Rarely do we get into, these tussles together. Like the slightest bickering happens maybe every few years. It's pretty remarkable. But when we got here, all of a sudden, there was a lot of tension. And I just didn't know what was going on. And I was so not used to it. I'm like, man, what is happening? I feel like we're just not communicating right now. And we were kind of getting at each other. Like we knew there was tension. We knew it wasn't right. But what we managed to do was this is what we typically do with whenever we notice things escalating or we notice a pattern coming into effect that is not helpful, or if we notice that we're just trying to be right and we're not listening to each other, we kind of say like, whoa, okay, let's take a step back here. What's going on? We kind of again, just take that meta view. And that's what we ended up doing within those first few weeks. And when we took that step back, well, we noticed that the biggest thing we were conflicting on was our schedules. Like I said, we were running these businesses. So we already had clients before we came to South Africa. So we were trying to figure out time zone differences with our clients. We were navigating a new space, also a new country. We really wanted to get out and explore the grocery stores. Go figure. You can't get the same things here that you can get back home in Toronto. Definitely a lot smaller selection, but we're trying to navigate our gym routine. We're trying to navigate talking to friends and family, all sorts of things, just like lots of variables. And yeah, the one thing that was getting to us was our schedules. And so we, instead of turning this conflict into more drama, what actually emerged from this conflict was a new creative solution. And I know this, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's going to sound like really simple, but for us, it was huge. Is that we agreed that every morning, and it took us a while to get this. Every morning we would spend 5-10 minutes. So our morning routine is we wake up, go to the bathroom, and then we meditate. And then after we finish meditating, we kind of just lay in bed and we go over our schedules for 5 to 10 minutes. And we go over a schedule for that day. And we just take a glance at the next 2 days if there's any flags. And by going through the schedule, we have an idea of who is going to be doing what at what time, who needs to use what space at what time. And it completely disappeared all of the issues that we were experiencing. And that was in January 2020. And now it's 6 months later, and we still do it every morning. And I actually don't see myself not doing this moving forward. It's such a valuable routine that we've put into place. And it emerged from this conflict that we were having, this uncertainty that we were having. So in terms of how we're handling uncertainty, so far, I'd say pretty good. And I'm just waiting for the next breakdown because I'm definitely not infallible, nor is our relationship infallible in any way.
It's funny you say this because Jennifer and I sat down recently, very similar, had some sort of a conflict arise and around something, and we realized it was a scheduling thing. And so we put a thing in the calendar every week and for us, at this point, it's just a weekly thing, but it's just to look ahead at the events for the week and make some decisions around how we're going to, divide and conquer for the week on different stuff and when we're going to get to see each other and what we plan to do together and apart for the week. And just that alone has been super powerful because I'm more of a planner by nature, by personality. Jen's more fly by the seat of her pants in the moment. And so that was creating some conflict. And then it's incredible how a simple thing like scheduling that I don't know, when you're a lot younger, you don't think that these boring things like scheduling and that kind of thing is what creates connection and intimacy in your relationship. And then you realize that kind of stuff is critical for connection and intimacy.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this question then. With that conflict, I mean, what was the process to get to that solution? Like, how much was there a lot of drama to get there? Was it like pretty easy dealing with that situation? Did you identify right away? What was that kind of situation like?
Fortunately or unfortunately, it just is what it is. Jen and I don't tend to experience a lot of drama at this point in our relationship, where we're fairly drama free. So it just resulted in, I can't even exactly remember the event that caused it, but we identified that, I think we got to the end of a weekend and hadn't really spent much time together for that weekend because I had some plans on one night and vice versa on another. And so we got to the end of the weekend, and then there was some other event in the next couple of weeks which I could make and Jen couldn't, which she was a bit disappointed about. And so it resulted in her feeling upset and disconnected, and me and the conversation to kind of bring that to the surface was just a pretty wearing our emotions on our sleeve kind of conversation on. She was feeling a bit disconnected, and then I could tell there was something up, and so reflected and realized, this is just a bit of a schedule conflict. Jen works on a different schedule to me and work-wise, and so she tends to work weekends or her sort of Monday to Friday, and then my Monday to Friday is Monday to Friday. So we realized that unless we plan and unless we put something in the calendar, then it doesn't exist. At least that's my paradigm. So we sat down and we put all our things we needed to put into the calendar for the next 3 to 6 months, and then put in a recurring event on a particular day each week to do our planning, and then put in a recurring event for getting together a little bit more frequently. And now it's in the calendar. It's amazing how it just removes all the tension for her and for me, and we know what's going on, and it's been great.
And it doesn't seem like it was really heading down that path toward drama. It just looked like, like we haven't spent any time together, and you actually were on the same page. Like, yeah, like we haven't spent any time together. Let's change this. But there were still a lot of great things that you did in terms of, you're on the same team. It wasn't like you versus Jen. It was like you and Jen against this problem of we're not spending time together. Not like, Jen, like you booked this thing on this weekend and now we can't see each other. No, Mike, you booked this thing on this weekend and now we can't see each other. You know what I mean? So I think that even that, just acknowledging that, because that's huge. That is huge. It's very easy to play the game of who's right and slipping into that. I know I've done that many times in many relationships in my life, and I will definitely continue to do that. But it sounds like you didn't get into that. And it was kind of like right there and then, this is my partner. There is a problem outside of us regardless, and we're going to solve that problem together as a team, as partners.
I remember I was sitting with a friend of mine the other day, and he was saying either from a book, which the name now escapes me, but it was along the lines of the 11 principles for a successful marriage, something like that. And he was saying that one of the core tenets was that when conflict arose, that your partner and you would come together and deal with it as a team, right? And it was very much like teamwork was a core tenet of what made successful relationships. So it was I think it was maybe one of the defining one of the main defining factors between divorce and non-divorce was when issues arose, did you solve them individually or did you solve them together as a team? And that really stuck with me. And yeah, I think to your point, it's the same thing. Can I shift gears slightly, Jonathan? And we talked in the green room before about, before when I got you to fill in some info for the show, you mentioned a few of the dichotomies that you feel you've come up against in life. And one of them was interesting to me was the dichotomy between growing a business and knowing that there is actually nowhere to get to. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. And I think that you and our listeners, any entrepreneurs out there, could really relate to this because building a business is tons of fun, right? And it's interesting. We actually touched on this idea of building the empire versus living a more simplistic life. And yeah, what's been on my mind, especially lately, is this idea of there is nowhere to get to. Or I say to myself, well, the only place we're really going to is our grave. Let's get real, right? We got this life. We're all headed in that direction. And so I often catch myself kind of craving, striving, like grinding really hard to the point where it's actually like not pleasant because I've set a goal and I really want to hit it instead of feeling energized by that goal. Maybe having more stress involved in that, maybe more of those stressful hormones flowing through my body rather than really soaking in and enjoying the experience and having fun with it, right? So I think that's why I kind of brought it up. It's this idea of like, let's build a business that is highly successful, highly impactful, whatever it is that you want to build. And it's going to take work. And especially when you have a startup, there's that startup grind. Very common. Whether you need to do it or not, I don't know. But I know that a lot of people experience that. And it can, again, it's finding that balance between not having that be stressful, because at the end of the day, although in this life, it seems it will matter a lot, at the end of the day, I don't want to seem morbid, but at the end of the day, we're all going to die. And the earth is going to, explode when, the sun's going to explode one day, the earth won't exist, for what, right? So I think that just kind of reminds me of something that we actually touched on earlier, is that idea of doing, and focusing a little less on that and a little more on the being. Who are you being in this moment? Because when you start from there in terms of, well, I'm being fun, I'm being energized, I'm being powerful, then what you do is you do all those things. You do things while you're being fun, while you're being powerful, while you're being energized. And then you're going to get a bunch of things while you're being fun, while you're being powerful, while you're being energized.
This existential question of, like in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? I think about this a lot, and in the annals of time and space, like I am but a speck of dust in this cosmic kind of time-space continuum. And so what I'm creating in my life, building with my business, all of that, none of it matters in the context of the big meta picture. My life will soon be forgotten, my business will soon be forgotten, my impact will soon be forgotten. And, this is, all you need to do is look back through the last few generations of human beings. I bet from the vast majority of people listening, you don't know any of the human beings in the last, 1,000 years that of all the incredible things that humans have done in the world and progress created, et cetera, like they're dead, right? They're gone. And here we are, we get to experience this wonderful, world that we've all kind of created, and the collective, humanity has created over the years, over the millennia. And so here I am, living my little life and dealing with a range of emotions, often some, you mentioned stress hormones, stress hormones flooding my body on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis for a variety of different reasons. And these have to do with the business and building that empire and all that kind of thing. And yet in that context we just described, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. So why am I living my life experiencing, just a flood of both, happy hormones, but stress hormones, and therefore shortening my life and also truncating the experience of life at the same time too. And I feel like that is just such a great dichotomy that I do not have any clarity or answers on in any major way. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm interested in having this conversation about how can I have it all? How can I have this life where everything is fun? Because I think it's possible. I'm willing to believe that it's possible. And I am in the pursuit of what that looks like in my life. And, I have some clients that are interested in that as well, and we work on that. And I would put it over to you. Why are you doing those things that do make you stressed?
I'm doing them because they're an important part of the sequence of achieving the things that I want to achieve. But I think the thing that I'd like to master more is my relationship to the experience and how the hormones and the emotions I choose to have as I do those things. I think the way you described it was a beautiful distinction of who am I being in the doing. If I can have a greater influence over who I'm being in the course of the doing, then whatever I do along the journey, I'll always be in control of, or at the effect of, who I'm choosing to be, not at the effect of, who I involuntarily become due to stress or other things where I can't control my emotions, let's say, monkey mind, reptile mind, etc. And so I guess this comes back to what is some of your practices for controlling, who you are being as you do the do?
It's a great question. So I'm going to give a few different ideas, and these are really practical things that our listeners can put into place. I put it in place in my life. I put it into place with clients. One huge thing that I actually work on with my clients, and I'm going to explain it briefly. Obviously, this is something that takes time, but is really the understanding the power of context. Context is decisive. Whatever we believe is possible, whatever we can think is the limits of what we believe is possible. Does that make sense, Mike? Are you still with me here?
Can you rephrase that another way?
Yeah. At the end of the day, our context for what is possible in this world and our context of reality defines reality's borders. As soon as something new becomes possible in this world, let's take for example, the 4-minute mile. You've heard of this story? In the 50s, physicists thought that if you ran faster than 4-minute mile, your body would explode or something crazy like that. Or was that the trains? If they went to a certain speed, your body would explode or something like that. And as soon as that wasn't the case, it was like, oh my God, what else is possible, right? And so our context decided that, nope, this wasn't possible. And so people didn't try it. People didn't go for it, right? So one huge thing, the question that I love to ask myself is, how do I create an empowering context around everything that I do in my life? Everything. Because that is something that will wake me up all the time, that will energize me all the time, even for the things that are kind of boring. Like I'm a coach. I'll let you in on the thing. Like when you're a professional coach, a lot of people sign up for these coaching schools. They hope that they're going to become coaches and they're just going to coach all the time. I would say I spend like 50% of my time, maybe even less, coaching, really. You spend a ton of time doing admin, marketing, follow-ups, having discovery calls, all the other things other than coaching. So, but the thing is I've created a context around all those other things that are for the most part, and I still have work to do, but for the most part are incredibly empowering. And they're just like tons of fun. And I create goals for myself and games for myself. And so I have a lot of fun with a lot of the things that I do. So I'd say that's one practice for sure to encompass that being, is really taking a look at your context that you're creating around some of the aspects of your life, particularly some of the aspects that you're enjoying less in your life.
How do you bring that context into focus? So for example, I might sit there or someone listening might sit there and go, okay, like I'm going to come up with a few different, we'll call them beautiful states that I could be in when I embark upon some kind of task or whatever it may be. Or maybe you could better define what that context is for you, Jonathan. But how do you bring that into focus so you kind of don't get lost? Because it's so easy to get lost down the rabbit hole of our monkey and reptile mind and forget the context to actually bring us back to a place of empowerment?
It really is going to depend on the person. I'm going to tell you some of the practices that I've put in place. And you're going to notice that I call them practices because that's really what they are. Ways of being are, at the end of the day, just brain patterns. That's what we are as human beings. We're just a bunch of brain patterns. And so how do I strengthen certain brain patterns that have me show up as powerful, that have me show up as compassionate, as patient, all these wonderful characteristics that I want to more carefully embody in my life? Well, I create practices around those things. And this kind of comes down to like mindset stuff as well. And it's really, how do you cultivate a mindset that allows you to, show up in those ways? And it really comes down to setting intentions. So that's one thing that I was going to say in terms of specifically to your question, is really setting intentions and doing so often. So there's a lot of people who love to journal at the beginning of the day. People do gratitude or whatever it is. Even when I look at my calendar, I can visualize certain meetings. I can get excited for certain meetings. I can see things that might stop me and think about how my highest self might show up to it. I stop working every hour to give my body a break, to give my eyes a rest from the screen. And in that process, I can re-energize myself and bring, again, that intention to the work that I'm doing. So lots of stops in order to take myself out of possible habitual automatic reaction habit patterns kind of thing. And again, bringing that intentionality to my life often is, and it doesn't take long, is something that has made a difference. And there's been a bunch of practices. I went through a phase where I had a chime going off every hour. That was a thing I did. I did affirmations. That's something that worked nicely for me for a while. There's so many cool practices out there, and I'm all about tasting all of them. I love to play around with them. I'll try one. It will work for only 2 weeks, whatever. I'll move on to the next one. I'll try it. It works for 2 years, but then I'll eventually get tired of it. I'll move on to the next one. Not a problem. Just do whatever it is, though, is that you remember that we are living like half of our life in automatic. We're just a bunch of habit patterns. So how can we start to kind of be more deliberate about crafting those habit patterns and the ways that we show up? And I think that is just super, super juicy.
I love it. It's got me thinking about my wall as I look at my walls up in my little study here, my home office, and think about how much more intentional I could be in putting up my little, best practices on what are the things that I like to do, and just that kind of reminder, right? And so, Jonathan, one of the other things that kind of ties into all this is you talked about the dichotomy between conflict and personal growth. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I think the intention behind that dichotomy is this idea of conflict being something that, generally speaking, I'm going to go ahead on a limb. This is a non-scientific estimate, but something like 99% of humans, what we do is we typically go down the path of either avoiding conflict or just exploding in conflict. There's the people at Vital Smarts, they use this idea of silence or violence is like one of the more common ways that we handle conflict, right? And what I kind of came to the realization of is conflict is going to happen in your life. I promise that. It's going to happen with your partner. It's going to happen with your kids. It's going to happen with your coworkers, with your family. Conflict is there. Everyone on earth has experienced conflict. We're all experiencing conflict right now, and we're going to continue to experience conflict for the rest of our lives. And I'm speaking about conflict specifically at a relational level. You're going to experience all sorts of conflict all the time, internal conflict. There's structural and systematic conflict, of course, but even just at a relational level with other people, conflict is always going to be there. So if really we know it's going to be there, let's start talking about what can we do about this? How can we handle this better? And what I came to the realization of is that when we really start to accept and embrace conflict as this thing that's inevitably going to happen, I realized that I get to start asking this question, okay, well, if conflict is going to happen, how can I use actually conflict as a tool for growth rather than just letting conflict kind of happen to me? How can I direct conflict? And I gave a really great example of my wife and I coming to South Africa earlier, how we used that conflict to actually create this new solution. Because it could just have easily have gone the other way where we were bickering with each other, creating all sorts of drama, getting other people involved, gossiping, blah, 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 all the stuff that you know all too well, right? So without kind of getting too into the thick of things, it's this classic growth mindset applied to conflict. It's how can I use this opportunity to grow? How can I turn this experience into something of value? Because conflict is going to happen. Conflict is a catalyst for change. So why not use that to change it in a way that I like it? And there's a lot of people that do that, whether they realize it or not. I mean, think about, you can talk to all the happily remarried couples out there. They are probably thrilled they went through that last conflict of divorce. That is just one of the best things that ever happened to them, because now they created this fresh new relationship. So there's this perfect instance of conflict that is bound everywhere that was used as this opportunity to create something new and to allow them to grow from the experience. And there's also something to be said about when we experience those internal conflicts as well. David Brooks, in his book, The Road to Character, he describes them as the valley of humility, right? So once you kind of go through those challenging times, you often come out stronger and greater at the end, more extraordinary. So it's kind of at the two levels. I kind of got into the internal conflict at the end, but mostly it has to do with the fact that conflict is going to happen. Okay, recognizing it's going to happen, instead of just letting it happen to me, how can I start to shift my perspective, shift my context on what conflict means in my life, and now start using conflict as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to come up with creative new solutions that may not have existed otherwise.
Where do you experience conflict in your life right now? Where's been, in what area or when has conflict created a new paradigm or a different level for you?
I think a lot of the examples that we talked about earlier in the show are kind of more of the recent ones that kind of come to mind right away, especially during like lockdown. I'm spending a lot of time at home. I spend that time with, my partner. So that's where most of the conflict happens. It's amazing. Personal relationships are just such a great place to grow, right? Such a great source of opportunities to learn about others and learn about yourself and how we all operate. I would say I can't actually think of any examples off the top of my head where that conflict really shifted something other than those examples I kind of gave at the beginning. And they were internal conflicts. They were challenges to my perspective that really shifted things. In terms of like an opportunity to grow as well, I can think of some times where I handled it really poorly. I remember there was this one time where I handled a conflict really poorly while Laura, my partner, and I were traveling. This is going to sound so ridiculous. I'm so embarrassed to say this. Okay, so we were in India and we were doing some long-term travels there. And we had this idea, like, let's go hang out in ashram. I want to do yoga all day. Laura, she did yoga teacher training. It sounds so great. You're like doing yoga 3 times a day. You're eating all this like great food, vegetarian food, and like you're studying yoga. And we were like into yoga at the time. And like, yeah, let's try this out. This is cool. So I went to the ashram. I was also reading like Sam Harris, like atheist literature. And here I am in this ashram in India reading atheist literature. And I'm not digging the ashram at all. Like it was, and in India also, this ashram was so traditional. And I'm reading this book called End of Faith. And it's just like, it's just so funny. There's the context again, right? My context is like, wow, like, religion can really blind people to the real purpose of all this stuff. And here I am seeing these people. What occurred to me at the time was people blindly following these traditions. Which is a very ignorant thing to say. And that's why I'm stressing that at that time. I don't know how I feel about it now. And I remember I was just not into it and I was not happy with the experience. And I decided to just skip out on lots of these classes. I didn't enjoy them. And I just chilled out and I read books. And I don't remember exactly the what the kind of fight was about, but that was the last fight that I had with my partner, Laura. That was in 2016. Now it's 2020. I remember it was the last time we like yelled at each other.
It's a pretty good track record.
It's a pretty good track record. We've come a long way. It has helped because she's been doing this work with me. So that was a huge thing, because what came from that conflict was a lot of discomfort, a lot of unpleasantness. Her feelings were hurt. I was frustrated. And I realized what a jerk I was being. So that was a huge perspective shift for me. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be being so nasty and being so right about this, and relax a little bit. And I got to say, we still had a little bit of time left in the ashram. I enjoyed it much more after that.
Very cool. Looking into peering into the future, whether it's personal or otherwise, what do you feel, Jonathan, is the conflict that you need to have, whether it's with yourself or outside of yourself, but you're not quite yet ready to have to elevate your life to another level?
I think it will have to do with, I've been thinking a lot lately about my coaching practice. And I've come to a point where my coaching practice is doing great. I have a pretty full roster of clients, and I'm kind of at this point where I know I can run a successful coaching practice. It's not even a challenge anymore. What fun thing do I want to do? What is going to actually be really challenging for me? And it's kind of like what we described earlier, that gap that I experienced with coming onto that guy's podcast. It's that kind of gap. Who do I have to be in order to grow my business in a different direction that I don't think is possible? That's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. And it's definitely going to be an internal conflict. I think that's going to be the greatest conflict. And in my opinion, those are some of the juiciest conflicts that I know that I'm going to experience in my future. In the greater scheme of things, I also know that as our society, we have a number of difficult conversations that are going to be had and need to be had in the coming decades. Very difficult conversations. And right now, I get the impression that a lot of people are not interested in listening to each other. So I was pitching myself to be a TEDx speaker in TEDx Cape Town, and I made it to the final round here right before COVID hit. And the whole idea behind my talk was this idea of we can have all these good ideas, and the TED stage is a great place for great ideas. But unless we have an ability to have tough conversations, to actually hash out, those new ideas are going to come very slowly. And most of them will be shot down because we don't necessarily like change very much as human beings. And so those are some of the tough conversations that we're going to need to be having, especially if, in light of COVID and all the exposing it's done of our existing systems and how fraught and fragile they are and how they don't work for everybody. What conversations do we need to have in order to once and for all build a world that works for everybody?
Do you think that today we are better or worse or the same at having difficult conversations just as human beings within society than say we were, for as long as maybe you could remember 10, 20 years ago?
My uneducated opinion is I'm going to say the same with a hint of worse. I'd say the same because education on the topic has not shifted pretty much at all. People have been studying conflict for, the peace and conflict studies. I don't know when it started, but some of these theories that I've been looking up are from the 80s, which are the newest theory, conflict transformation theory, which I recommend is super interesting to look at too. It came out 40 years ago. Conflict resolution has been around since the early 1900s. And I don't think much has changed kind of in that regard in terms of the individual's ability to handle conflict, the average individual. It's definitely not taught in schools. And that said, the media has dangerously amplified the situation and has allowed us to, and it has allowed me as well, to really play into my confirmation bias, which is, so real for me, and I'd say all of us all the time. Confirmation bias is always at play. And yeah, my Facebook feed, my whatever, my LinkedIn feed, my news media reading, all of it feeds that. And so I think that there's a danger because our ability to handle it has not shifted. And now we're feeling, I know I do, more righteous than ever about what I believe, and with a lack of skill set in our ability to handle conflict, I think that's a dangerous mix.
I know we have the benefit of 2020 hindsight, but do you feel more, I don't know what your preference is around kids and whether or not you want to have kids, but do you feel more or less confident about the world that you would maybe be bringing kids into if you did choose to today than, let's say, 20 years ago?
It really depends on the context you create, right? In terms of where we're heading as a society, I would say I'm mostly optimistic. That is a conversation that I'm still having, and I'd say I'm mostly optimistic. I think we've done amazing things as a species in terms of the technology we have, and although there are dangerous trends kind of coming up, I think for the most part we're going to come together out of even necessity to make it all work. And I think that we have just come a long way in terms of our track record on equality. So I think there's a lot to look forward to and a lot to be excited about, and some huge challenges ahead of us. And, diverting a little bit, I think that some of those challenges have to do with the fact that we are trying to solve these problems like climate change, like these eroding institutions and all these kind of racism and all those kinds of things. And we're trying to solve these problems from the same context as a human being. And there's going to need to be a much bigger conversation about what it means to be a human being so that we can create a new context around that and solve these problems in new creative ways that we didn't see before. But anyway, we're getting a little philosophical here. I'm optimistic. That's my answer. That's my short answer.
Hey, Jonathan, I appreciate your time and thank you so much for joining me on the show and having a wide-ranging conversation about conflict, about business, about life, about relationships. And I've really enjoyed it. So, dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. Thank you for being such a thoughtful host and asking some real stumpers.
Can I ask one final question before we wrap up? Actually, before I ask that one question, we haven't talked too much about your specific practice itself, or any of the work that you do. But for anyone listening that's curious to dig deeper into some of the things that you've got going on or whatever it may be, is there anything in particular that you'd recommend they check out to learn more about you?
Certainly. Great place to check me out is on LinkedIn and also my website, mindfulcommunication.me. And I have 2 resources on there. One is free, and it's actually a 4-part video training series on how to transform any and all conflicts in your life. I put a lot of time and effort into this, so I'd highly recommend checking it out. 4 awesome videos, as well as some email follow-ups to really solidify the learnings. And then I also have a cool tool. It's called Tough Talks Made Easy. And if you're having a difficult conversation that you've been avoiding and you just want kind of a co-collaborator, a co-conspirator to help you come up with a game plan and like kind of a roadmap on how you're going to handle that tough conversation, that's where you can book 45 minutes with me. We come up with that game plan, find your natural, powerful way to confidently have that conversation go as painlessly as possible and find that piece you're looking for. So I'd say those are some big resources. And of course, my podcast, the Mindful Communication Podcast, I think it's pretty great. I definitely recommend checking that out. So those are some places you can find out more about me.
Rockin'. Thanks, man. And so a parting question would be, what's one thing, Jonathan, one action you'd like to take in the near future to bring more of your life into alignment?
Oh, that is a good question. What's one action that I would take in my life to bring my life more into alignment? Like where I'm out of alignment right now and I want to be more in alignment? Okay, wow. This is the curveball of curveballs. So thank you, Mike Reed, for passing this to me. I would say one action to bring myself more in alignment. Oh man, this is tough. I mean, one space that I think I haven't been really fully aligned with what I want to be doing is in terms of my physical health. Once lockdown kind of came in, I was I've done like a home workout. I work out like every day. I think for a lot of people that sounds like pretty good, but I'm really into rock climbing, and rock climbing kicks my butt. And the gym has been closed. And so I haven't really been putting my physical needs at the top of the list. I've just been kind of doing this like normal routine, which is like, okay. So I think that's one action I could take, is redesigning a physical plan, taking it more seriously, putting that into action. So thanks for putting me on the spot, Mike.
Awesome. Jonathan Miller, thank you for joining on the show.
Pleasure.
Hey, so thanks for listening. You know, the more I record these episodes, the more I realize this show is as much about navigating the emotional journey of business as it is about exploring the dichotomies my guests face along the way. You know, I've come to believe the more awareness we can bring to our emotions, the better the decisions we can make, and therefore the better we can navigate these dichotomies as they come up in our lives. And look, at the end of the day, I just love talking life, business, philosophy with like-minded people who really think deeply about the world, their business, and how to lead a good life. So if you want to connect with me or learn more about some of the things I'm up to, just head to www.mikejamesreid, that's reid.com. There's a whole bunch of links to some of the cool stuff we do at Dent, plus a little more on me as well. Otherwise, you can follow me or connect with me on all the usual socials just by adding /Mike James Reid or searching for Mike Reid as well. Okay, until next time, thanks so much for listening. And one final request is, if you've enjoyed this show, please give it a rating or review on Apple or Google Podcasts or any other way that you listen to the show. Ratings help the show get found and just out to more people who will hopefully love it as much as you do. Plus, it tells me to keep putting these episodes together for you. So thanks so much, and much love from me.